Generally, if you see twins, there's going to be one that's more dominant than the other one. Jenny and I are both very big personalities and strong in our own rights. And I think it made more sense for us to go kind of separate, especially during those formative years.
I don't know how people run a business without their exact opposite. Like it's incredible to have, this yin yang balance in here. But I think I used to beat myself up a bit about that I'm not very good. Well, that I can do it. It just takes me longer. The details, like I'm not really interested in, like I'll come up with a big idea, but then I'm not really interested. Then I move on to the next thing.
Do you really know what your neighbors do for a living? Have you delved deep into their professional passions? No? That's okay, because we'll do it for you here at The Practical Optimist, where we're shining a light on the leaders and trailblazers that live right down the street. I'm your host, Ken Schmidt, founder and CEO of Turning Point Executive Search, a global recruiting firm, and author of The Practical Optimist. So what's more exciting, taking over the business your dad started 38 years ago, or working with your twin sister to expand a data analytics firm? Well, guess what? You don't have to choose, because today we have twin sisters, Jenny Dinnen and Katie Rucker, who are doing it all. If you never thought it was possible to work with a family member without pulling your hair out, today's episode might just change your mind. Katie and Jenny will talk everything from teamwork and taking risks to trusting your employees and pushing through what they call the messy middle, all while laughing a ton and sharing their stories of growing up as twins with entrepreneurial parents. If you listen carefully and really pay attention, you just might learn something new as Jenny Dinnen and Katie Rucker take us through the intersection of leadership and life. All right, so let's jump in first of all with kind of what McKinsey Corp does. I know that you're in the customer insights and customer experience sector, if you will, which is a broad and big sector, especially these days. But maybe you can give us a quick sense of what the business of McKinsey Corp does. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Katie, do you want to start?
Sure. So McKinsey as Ken mentioned, we're a second generation family owned business. Our dad started the company in 1985. Jenny and I are twin sisters, now co-owners and co-presidents of McKinsey. So we are a customer insights consulting firm. We're a small boutique firm up here in Orange County. So really helping brands be able to more clearly understand who their customers are, how to stay in touch with them, and how to find more similar customers to them, leveraging really research, customer insights, and then laying some of that across the customer's journey, doing a lot of journey mapping, persona development, those types of things.
Wonderful. And I know we were talking offline a little bit about how the business has kind of changed and evolved over the years as well. And, with the changing economy and marketplace around us, obviously we've all had to adapt and kind of adopt a new style and new approach. But your sector, your business in particular, has really seen some phenomenal changes over the last, 5 to 7 years. Jenny, do you want to kind of go into maybe kind of how the business is today compared to how it was, let's say, 20 years ago or so when your dad was running it?
Yeah, we were having a conversation yesterday with someone, if he started this 38 years ago, and I said it was kind of like lightning in a bottle of being in that data analytics space. He's got some amazing people that work with him. He was a CPA and a numbers guy, so really understanding and digging into the numbers, which was amazing. But yesterday in a conversation, I said, it is fun. We used to be in the convincing business a little bit of convincing people to use data to make data-driven decisions. That has shifted definitely in the last few years. We're now in the confirming business. People say, we know we need to use data, but we don't exactly know how. We might be drowning in information. So I will say the speed at which the amount of data that's available, the ways of collecting information is just exploded exponentially. So running an insights firm and a data firm here that it's extremely exciting and kind of crushingly overwhelming at the same time of trying to keep up with getting all the information. So at the core, I will say we are the same mission of empowering companies to make better business decisions based on who their customers are, how to stay in touch with them, those types of things, understanding behavior. But the mechanisms by which we gather information, analyze, and bring back, that has for sure changed tremendously over the last few years. And it's a fun space to be in. Most days.
Yeah, most days, right. Like every position out there, every industry, right? As long as there's 100%. More good days than bad days, then you're in the right space.
You know what? We are in a good spot to be in, that there is just a lot of talk and activity around the space that we're in, and leveraging data is and information, turning it into information that then you could be making informed decisions with, is a really good thing, not just collecting more and more and more. So no, it's an exciting business to be a part of. Yes.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, in my mind, I think about, there's kind of like three phases, right? Where you've got the collection of the data, right? And then you've got the synthesis, or, how do you actually analyze it? And then what's the call to action? I keep thinking about over the last, I guess 3 now election cycles, just the fact with all the pollsters being so incorrect, right? And just way off the mark in terms of what they expected. And part of that is because people don't pick up the phone anymore to answer surveys, right? So how do you get to them? How do you accurately collect that data? And then once you collect it, how do you know you really have a true representation across the spectrum to actually extrapolate and then make some estimates and some guesses about whatever the issue might be? It must be a fascinating, but sometimes frustrating, kind of activity.
Yeah, I will say too, on the front end of that, because I think you had started with phase 1 of like collecting data, a really big part of that we put on the front end of this is really ensuring, like, what question are we answering? Like, what's our assumptions? What are the hypotheses going in? What information might we already have? And then as we're moving into data collection, who are we collecting it from, right? Like, who's a representative sample, making sure that we're collecting all voices. So there's this big part in the beginning of this, as opposed to jumping into the deep end of the pool and just collecting more and more and more, of really starting the beginning. Trust is a very big thing these days, of, trusting the data stories and what you can get out of it. So we make sure on the front end of really making sure, what is it that we're actually looking to measure, validate, how are the results going to be used, so that we are collecting from the right people at the right time, asking the right questions, those types of things. I'd say that is a really, really, really big piece of it, which then makes the rest of it easier to then have actionable insights on the back end of it that we just. I
think I'd also add in there as well. Really, and one of the biggest things that we talk with brands about is not doing like one research project in its own silo. And I think that a lot of it comes back to is how has the brand been showing up for their consumer base, let's say, or the community at large, and how are they showing them like that same level of like respect if they're asking for opinions and feedback back. And so really, that's where then we come in and really work with brands to be able to create an overarching research strategy that can be laid against or kind of in conjunction with their marketing strategy, to be able to open those lines of communication on a regular basis, and then show how that feedback or those insights that you're getting is being used to make like operational change or innovation and those types of things, feedback back to the consumers and the respondents on how you use that. Then they're going to be more likely to respond to surveys in the future, because they understand that their time is being valued and their ideas are being like utilized. And so I think that that's a big thing. And so even thinking about it more from like the polling or the election cycle, you're then just reaching out at these certain pinpoints along the way, and you're one survey company that's calling and asking, and they may not always be as truthful because they haven't formed that full true relationship with the organization that they're that's asking for their opinions. And so I think that it's just an interesting one. So I think really the biggest thing is about how are the brands showing up authentically for their consumer base, and being able to then again build that trust to be able to do that.
That's a great perspective. I mean, it's funny when you think of data collection or customer surveys or customer experience or pollsters, especially, you don't really think much. I don't think much about the relationship, right? And that trust factor is so important, so that you, as the person providing your insights or whatever your feedback is, that you trust that A, the information is going to be used the right way, and B, that the questions themselves are hopefully objective and not loaded or not subjective one way or the other. That's got to be tough to do. But let's a couple of things that you said, Katie, that I want to kind of touch on. So you talked about obviously the trust and the relationship, with the customers. But so the two of you growing up, right? You had the relationship with your parents. You had the relationship to this business as kids in the household, being exposed to it. I'm curious. I mean, did you think when you were growing up as your parents being entrepreneurs, did you know what that actually meant? Tell us about how that journey was, kind of growing up in that household.
That's so interesting. So our dad started, when he started the company, again, in the bonus room of our house growing up, and he'll still say it today, his sole mission was to be able to provide for his family. Like, it was just, my job is to, create this company to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. He talked about his business, but I think we more organically saw it. Like, we didn't have big conversations around what entrepreneurship meant, I think, until like way later. And really, I think by the time we got more involved, our mom also, she stayed at home with us, like when we were in school. And then she started her company when we were in high school. So it was kind of later for her doing that. And it was more of like I'm going to say like a passion kind of project. So she was in the corporate meeting and event planning. She loved it. And it was a really successful company here in Orange County as well. But it was more a way for her to be able to like lean in about, what her passions were about being able to provide, stuff for those brands. But sure. I think the biggest thing, like, we learned a lot, but more through osmosis with them, and definitely had no plans of getting involved in Mackenzie at all.
Yeah. I don't think either one of us really knew what Dad did. I mean, I always say I knew that there were computers. I knew that he traveled a lot, and I knew there were motorcycles involved somehow, but we didn't know what he did. I think in high school, we started, things have changed. We did a lot of data entering of customer satisfaction surveys, opening the mail, doing all those kind of things in high school. So we started understanding a little bit, but I think I don't think I realized until later, and now both of us have kids and have girls. We've got 4 girls between the two of us, that we grew up with parents that, started their own business. My mom had a few different jobs. I think she was a med tech. She was a Weight Watcher leader. She was like a few different things. And then in her 40s, started her own business. So, I think we learn, I think like you can, I think, reading your book and hearing your story about your dad and stuff, of like, we were learning that it's okay to take chances and it's okay to do things. A friend of mine a while ago said, "How do you know you'll be successful, Jenny?" Like, I was like, "I don't know. I just know that I will. Like, I'll figure it out." And like, I think we saw our parents figuring it out. We saw how they treated people. So I don't think we knew any different because it's what we grew up with. But I mean, our parents worked on the weekends, worked at nights. We were at their offices. So it was a family business, but it was their business. We were just going to work and we knew everybody there. Yeah.
Did you think it was kind of the norm that, sure, people just have parents that have their own businesses, or is that kind of typical?
I
mean, as far as your friend group or kind of your peer group out there, yeah.
Yeah, I think growing up, I think that our parents were really the only ones that had their own company.
Okay, sure.
So I do think, again, Jenny and I reflect back a lot now of saying, what do we want to talk differently with our kids about it? And so we really talk more openly about kind of the journey of starting. I mean, we just started a second company recently, and I'm talking with my high schooler about like the things I'm learning and like why we're doing it and following your passion and feeling like there's a space for us, and like kind of talking about kind of that blue ocean that you're trying to like capitalize on and those different kinds of things. And so I think that we both are talking differently now, and more in hindsight of being able to say, how do we inspire them to kind of start thinking about entrepreneurship differently than maybe where we did. I don't think that, at least for me, I can speak for myself, I wasn't originally thinking about even going into like ownership of a company or ever thinking that I could start my own, even though I had entrepreneur parents. But I think it was just more because, at least from like my perspective, I didn't see them talking about that in the same way. What I feel like I heard more about was the challenges and the struggles, which totally comes with entrepreneurship, but it wasn't, I don't feel like we had conversations about the flip side, but I guess they organically were showing us that. But again, Jenny and I, it's so funny because, you can be a twin. So we're like the same, but we lived different lives, even though we grew up in the same house. So we have different interpretations of some things.
Which is great. That's what I love about it as well. And, and I think for my sister and I, my sister is 4.5 years younger than me. And, we always talk quite often about how her memories of our parents. My mom was in real estate and my dad was a Jack in the Box franchisee. And memories that we have are very different, right? We were both in the same house. We were both at the same kitchen table with our parents talking about it. But the memory of the impact that a certain decision had, or moving or doing this or doing that. It's funny how in the same household you have two completely different experiences.
Yeah. That's a really good, just remembering that everybody's reality of where they're coming from, the perceptions that you have of what these things are. I was thinking too, I wonder if we are on a different, I think they were entrepreneurs and they were in it, like they weren't thinking, okay, what lessons are we teaching? They were like the first gen, we are second gen. So now there's a lot more reflective maybe in what we're doing, or I don't know if it's just a different time, but I think they were thick in it of growing a business and not thinking, what lessons am I teaching? I mean, right or wrong, or I don't know, which actually I guess it would be a good question to ask
exactly
what their perception is, of but to us, they went to work every day and worked hard. I will say, I know Dad worked hard. They both did, in different, what they did.
Well, I mean, obviously our listeners can't see this, but the three of us are now in our home offices, right? I mean, you're both in Orange County. I'm here in San Diego. When you were growing up, did your dad go to an office, or was there some extent of working from home as well?
He started in the bonus room. I know we had was it Penny? It was his first lady. She used to work in the bonus room of the house in Viejo, which is funny. And actually, I live now down the road from where his very first office was. So I don't know how many years in, but he had an office, and then started growing of where he was. So I'll have to ask him how many years, but he was in there. But it is funny of now being back. I mean, now we're back at we're hybrid, our company, but definitely during the pandemic of working back in their house, in the bonus room of our houses or bedrooms of our houses. It's definitely an interesting full circle moment. But he had an office, I'd say after the first few years when he started expanding. For sure. Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and for me and my dad, I mean, his office, so to speak, was the actual Jack in the Box restaurant. So I remember, going with him and delivering gifts, around the holidays and going to help out on the floor. And obviously, I got trained. I worked for him for a little over 5 years. But same kind of thing. So that experience was different, and kind of what you talked about, where it wasn't like my parents sat around and said, "Okay, now we're going to teach you a lesson about perseverance, or now we're going to talk about resilience." It was just talking about experiences, what's happening at work, like any parent would talk about. Yes. And those are the things that you remember, and they make an impression, and they set a tone and an expectation. And like you said, I mean, when somebody asks you, how do you know you're going to be successful? You don't in any job, right? No, but exactly. You feel confident and perhaps maybe you have not arrogance, but enough, hubris to really say, okay, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to figure it out. I know enough to know that I can make this work, and there's going to be some difficult days, but I'm going to push through. And so those are the kind of the subtle, if you will, maybe even kind of unconscious, lessons that our parents taught us.
Yeah. When I love, one of the things that I talk to my 11-year-old about a lot is that I want her to know that she has agency over her life. And I do know, even watching our mom change careers and do things, that she was like, I'm not happy with this right here. I'm going to do something different. And that was an option. It was an option. I mean, she fully switched full careers midstream. And I think that's incredible to say, where I chat with other people and they're like, well, I guess this is it. Like, this is the career I picked. I guess this is it. And I'm like, but it doesn't have to be. And so I think we saw that happen. And I want my girls to know, like, if you're not happy with whatever situation that you're in, you can change it. Like, you have the agency to change. And so
I agree. Yeah.
We learned that without realizing we were learning that. I thought that was just what everybody learned.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I talk about in the book also, is just, having an entrepreneurial mindset doesn't necessarily mean that you are a business owner or an actual entrepreneur. It's really, in my mind, it's more of, like you said, you have agency, you have control over what you do and your destiny. Don't just wake up one day and realize you're in the same job for 25 years and you're just miserable. I hear that a lot from very senior executives that find themselves out, looking for work for the first time because of a layoff or acquisition or whatever it might be. And now they say, I'm not sure what I should do now. And they realize they really didn't thoroughly enjoy what they used to be doing. So they're really kind of lost. So that's great what you talk about. So let's kind of pivot for a second here. And so, speaking of my book, the title, as you know, is called The Practical Optimist, which is also the title of this podcast as well. And it's really kind of sparked some really exciting conversations with people that I've known for a long time, but I've never really talked to them in depth about kind of how they describe themselves, if you will. So I'm curious for both of you. So let's start with you, Katie. So what are the words or phrases that you might use to describe yourself and your kind of philosophy on life and or business?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think it's such a great question. I don't have my water bottle, but optimist is right. Like, this huge sticker down the side of my big water bottle.
I love it.
For me, I would say, like, right now, and it's kind of been like my overarching theme for the last about 10 years, is really leaning into the power of yes. And that, like, one yes can really change the direction of your life, and really pushing tying that into pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So really, back in 2014, I did a year of yes, of saying yes to anything that scared me, but that I knew would help me grow. And I think it really ties back into even what Jenny was saying, is being able to have agency over our lives, but having to also take the time to slow down and have like the real honest look at yourself to be able to say, where do I want to be? And then where do I think I am today? And like, where do I need to start to grow with that? And so, that I think is kind of, for me right now, is like an overarching, like, what am I saying yes to? That again is making me a little bit uncomfortable, but it just continues to push. And then I know that if I follow a plan, do the hard work, do the work, like whatever, that it's going to like exponentially make a huge impact in my life. So I think that that's shown up through a lot of efforts in professionally and personally for me over the last 10 years.
I love that. I love that. Well, and we'll definitely come back to that power of yes, given that you've got a rather large hike coming up soon. We'll come back to that shortly. But
that was my latest yes.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And Jenny, how about yourself?
I think, I love the positive. I'm really big on collaboration and kind of an abundance mindset of there's just so many possibilities out there, which then, Kate actually gave me an idea jar over here that I have. There's never been a new idea that I don't love. I'm just possibilities, of like what we can do and how things can be. I think I'm an Enneagram 7 of the dreamer, of like, I can see where things can go, which I love. I think I read some quote in your book, I've got it here, but something about taking audacious risks, I think you said, but cautious risks or something.
Right.
And I know a while ago we did our imperative tests my purpose statement that I kind of wrote, at least for work, was that I love rallying people together to empower brands to reach their audacious goals. So I love working with, so it's kind of back to collaboration, but my favorite thing is to be in a room with incredibly smart people solving problems that like actually matter, like dreaming big about stuff. So I love to rally people together from all different lives. I'm a includer on my Strength Finders. So I love being around people and then stretching to say what's possible. So I'm a dreamer, I guess. Maybe that's a good way.
I love it. I love it. No, that's a great combination of the two of you. I mean, in terms of what you're focusing on, and you can, again, our listeners can't see this, but just, you can see if I had you on mute and I didn't know what you were saying, I probably could tell, right? Because I mean, the passion, you're like me, we talk with our hands, we're always kind of on the go, those kinds of things, but the passion, the excitement, the engagement, and the very genuine enjoyment of what you do comes through. And we're very fortunate, the three of us, that we can say that. Not everybody can say that about their career. So that's a good place to be. So I want to touch on, based on the fact that both of you describe yourselves in that way, power of yes, and then the collaboration piece as well, and pushing forward. How do you complement each other in the business? Right. I mean, you always have a dynamic. There's a great book called The Power of Two that I read a number of years ago, talking about how, every great company has, for the most part, two great leaders. One might be the main face of the company that you might see publicly, but in almost every case, there's somebody also behind the scenes doing it just as much work, just not as visibly doing it. And so for the two of you, you've got that dynamic, plus the fact that you're sisters as well, and bringing that family dynamic in. So talk to us about, how you complement one another. Do you defer to one another for certain things, knowing your strengths? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think if you had asked us, and going back kind of to the family business side of things, if you had asked us growing up if we'd be running a business and then just starting a second one together, like never in a million years. So we ended up actually at different high schools. We did not get along very well. I think the big thing with being twins is really, and I, say this a lot of times, I think generally, if you see twins, there's going to be one that's more dominant than the other one. But Jenny and I are both very big personalities and strong in our own rights. And I think it made more sense for us to go kind of separate, especially during those formative years. Mm-hmm. We then did come back we went to college together, but again, lived very different lives. And so it really was through a lot of us kind of coming together, and we worked with a transition consultant that helped us once we started the transition from our dad to our ownership. And really with that, I think the biggest thing was really being able to get to know each other kind of as the people that we are today. And then leading into your question with those strengths of really being able to say, what are my strengths? What are, Jenny's strengths? What do we like to do? What do we not like to do? And so we ended up splitting the company in a way where then Jenny's sales and marketing and innovation, kind of R&D, those types of things, then mine's more inside. So like, while Jenny loves like a million ideas, I'm a to-do list person. So then I come behind her. Right now I have probably like 20 sticky notes all over my desk, because I like sticky notes now more than to-do lists, because then I can just like success after each one. So then usually I'm like running behind Jenny to basically say like, how are we going to actually implement what you're talking about? And then, like she said, I gave her the idea jar, because it was finally like, we have to actually like move some of these forward, and we can't move all of them forward at the same time. So, and that's how we've traditionally split things kind of in the company itself. I think mine really was, and like part of the idea of starting to say yes to more things was that I also, though, didn't want to only be the person who was inside. I really did want to be able to have my own kind of successes and my own name within the community. And so then it's stretching more and more. So now, I get a little bit more blended in on some of the sales side of things. And I really am enjoying it a lot more too. But that's how we've traditionally split things.
Yeah, she's definitely come over into this world, which is fun on this side of things. But I think a really big thing was, and I think growing up, watching my own girls, and different is not good when you're younger, trying to like fit in and doing it everyone of like the same. And so I think we were so different. But once we started realizing, because I don't know how people run a business without their exact opposite. Like it's incredible to have, this yin yang balance in here. But I think I used to beat myself up a bit about that I'm not very good. Well, that I can do it. It just takes me longer. The details, like I'm not really interested in, like I'll come up with the big idea, but then I'm not really interested. Then I move on to the next thing. So, but now I have an incredible team that Kate leads and that we have. And we can still do these things. But once I could say out loud, this is what I love doing. This is where I'm lit up. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I don't want to be doing. And once we were just honest with it, as opposed to pretending and not, so I don't know if that's just age of them being more comfortable with saying where we are. But there's certain things that we defer to each other on, inside operations or new ideas, or then balancing. I mean, if we both have ideas of, okay, what are we focusing on now? You can't have so many number one top priorities. So is it the Essentialist, one of the books I've got, that there's, how do we streamline down and say, okay, all the ideas are great, but these are the 3 that we're focusing on now. Let's move them forward, and then we can do it. And Kate's taught me slowing down is a
I think too. I mean, and that I think just comes with strategy, right? Like, where is the growth and like, where is the direction? And that I really feel like we have always been in lockstep together with where we want to be going with the company. And that just continues to evolve. And we are extremely lucky, the fact that we are sharing a vision of kind of where we go. And I mean, even like yesterday, it was like saying, oh, what happens in 5 years? Like, what if we go fully remote? I said, so it was my first time saying it to Jenny.
I know.
Like, my husband and I are talking about doing a year on the road, because my kids are
wow. Yeah.
I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, sure.
I know, but I'll be empty nesters in 5 years. So it's kind of crazy to think about, but that's definitely not the same chapter that Jenny's in, because her kids are a lot younger. And so I was like, what, like for us to start to dream, but that's, the benefit of at least then also like owning a business and owning, having that kind of flexibility to be able to say, could we start, if I want to start dreaming about that next chapter, how do we start to move? Like, what do we need to do as an organization? And that dream may not, come to life or something, but that is the benefit of, owning the business, and owning the business also with then like family, because I think that you can understand and support each other's kind of whole life ideas, visions, maybe a little bit differently than you would with like a partner that's not family.
I think that's also then what we both have been leaning into a lot more on this kind of strategic foresight and futurist work of, but like, what is it we want the future to look like? And it was nice. I mean, it was the first time I heard yesterday, like, oh, I might go on the road for a year. I was like, okay, wait a second, but it was nice. And it might seem really far out, but her saying like in 5 years from now, but there's certain decisions that then we're making, and then saying, okay, well, what decisions would we make now to move there? It doesn't mean everything has to be different, but then we can at least start planning for the future that we want instead of just being reactive and saying, well, I guess this is the way we are. I mean, our team is mostly remote. So does it make sense to have an office? Well, this is what I want. This is what you want. Like, what do we want? And so we don't have to be making reactive decisions. We've got time to kind of sit with those things. And what does that mean? So
that makes perfect sense. I mean, and any consultant that you talk to as well will talk about, if you do want to set your business up to eventually be sold, you've got to start making decisions towards that end at least 3, if not 4 or 5 years in advance, which feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen in 3 months, never mind 3 or 4 years. But it's true. You got to, I mean, at least incorporate that longer term goal into the shorter term decisions. It may not be a specific decision about it, but it's got to be part of that dialogue. Otherwise, you're going to be behind the 8 ball when 5 years does come up, which will happen very, very quickly.
And now a short word from our sponsor. If you're a baseball fan like me, you're thrilled that the season is finally back in full swing, and you know how incredibly important it is to field the best team. And not just a team of pitchers, outfielders, or catchers, you need a well-rounded, multifaceted team with a stellar work ethic and strong skills, both technically and culturally, to truly drive results across your organization. Now, most companies don't have the resources of a Major League Baseball team, nor do they have a team of scouts that spend all day, every day, just recruiting new players. That's where Turning Point Executive Search comes in. With over 100 years of combined experience, our team of talent scouts knows where to go and how to attract MVP caliber candidates for every industry and company size across the US. Plain and simple, our placements make a huge impact. So let us help you build a world-class team. And now, back to the conversation.
I think that's a unique thing, though, too, I will say about family business is that I do believe that we think generationally, right? If like once you really do get in, so going from first to second generation is like, as Jenny said, it was going from the entrepreneur, the founder. That's like a totally different mindset. Going from first to second generation is sometimes they say like one of the hardest transitions because you're taking that entrepreneur spirit and then putting systems, process, those types of things more in place. And so then but now then it is thinking actually more of saying like, but if we want something that we can then pass on to our next generation. So we are thinking like a lot of decisions are made with that like long-term vision in mind that I do think is something unique to family businesses.
No, I agree, definitely. And I'm curious, so in terms of your staff, because there's no other family in the business now aside from the two of you, correct?
My husband works here. Actually,
he does? Okay.
Our aunt works here. So my mom has a twin as well, or our mom has a twin. And so Aunt Carol works with us as well. So there's actually four of us.
Okay. Well, and I was curious about, obviously you're 100% transparent with each other and probably with your aunt as well and your husband. But how transparent of a business do you run with the other non-family employees? For example, you talking about maybe going on the road for a year. Do you, and then if you do, when do you share that with the team? And how much do they know about kind of your long-term goals?
When they listen to your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. This will be when they find out.
That one, I think that we're really, I believe that we're like really transparent about things. It is kind of just our leadership style. Last year, we actually encouraged one of our team members. We do a weekly huddle. So I had just sometimes you got to add a little something else. So one of the questions was, if money and time was like not an object, what would you do? And just, it's really interesting to see like what people came up with. And one of the gentlemen on our team had mentioned that he would love to be able to go spend at least a month in Europe, specifically in Germany. He had lived there before and wanted to see his host family and those types of things. And I was like, And so I said, why don't you do it? And he's like, what do you mean? And so like later on, he had come into the office for a meeting and I said, like, for a real deal, like, why don't you do it? And he's like, that's an option. I was like, yeah, that's an option. And so we like encouraged him to go and actually encouraged him to take more time as vacation and PTO than working.
He worked over there.
But he did work part-time while he was there. And really like, I just really like believe in, we get one shot at this life and tomorrow's not guaranteed. So it's also like that benefit of being able to say like, how do we potentially like come up with solutions, either like that this is what I want to go do, but this is how I would be like still here supporting.
To clarify, Kate, what I heard yesterday was that you might be working from the road for a year.
100% from the road. Yeah, no, not taking a gap year.
Not a year-long vacation.
100% working, because we have that benefit now of being able to do it, which
our team works from wherever. I don't know.
A couple years ago, I never would have thought that we could do something like that. So I I wouldn't think to like share that, you know.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Or to not share,
wouldn't think not to
share that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you wouldn't keep it, secret, so to speak.
Yeah. Because I want to encourage our team. I mean, I think too, I just recently heard, which I just felt like this was like the best way I'd heard this, is present, come with a solution to be supported rather than a problem to solve. And so I do think that if somebody's coming and like one of our team members says, hey, I have this idea that I kind of want to do. And I've thought about how it may impact the business. I've thought about some potential solutions. I've thought about these kinds of things. I mean, that is, an easier way to help get support about things than to say, here you go. And then like putting that, more where it's on us to have to problem solve.
Sure. But if it's their idea, then they should shoulder the burden of coming up with, hey, here are some objections that you might have or concerns that you might have. I've thought about those. But again, and it's funny, the three of us are talking about this as though this is the way everybody runs a business. Yes. This is the way every manager, every leader, every VP operates. And the truth is it's not. I mean, I think because we are products of being family businesses, as part of, a parental unit, if you will, that was also running a family business. And it's just our mindset. We don't know any other way to communicate, right? And it's just amazing that we can impart that on our team, even though we have small staffs. Mine's much smaller than yours, but still we have a team that we can impart that on. And I would say that, if I can be inspirational in my life, that's my goal. Right. Inspiring somebody to be a better dad, a better husband, a better whatever it might be, and a better leader, to give that control and that power and that independence to your staff and let them do the job that you hired them to do, and trust, back to that word trust again, trust that they're going to do what's best for the business and not make just purely selfish decisions.
Yeah. It is an interesting, for a while I worked at Home Depot or HSBC, HD Supply, the B2B side, HSBC Bank for a while. And so it is good to go out and have gotten some big corporate, working cubicle land and office space type of thing. But it was really interesting because this was all I knew, like how you treat employees, what you did. Like how they treated their employees, like family or whatever. And then going out, kind of say like in the real world, it's like, oh my gosh, like that is not how I want to be treated. I had some really great bosses and good things, but it was just very different. I'm like, oh man, I think that then I appreciated it more because I just assumed that this is the way everybody treats their team. Everybody does things. So it was, I would not go back to certain things that I went through back then. And those
but it also makes you, the great leader that you are today, having had that experience. If you hadn't gone out there and done that, same for me. I've worked for, as you know in my book, I call them Freds, right?
Yes.
The terrible bosses out there that are just, horrible. And no offense to anybody who's actually named Fred, but we just kind of chose that name as kind of a humorous, line through the book. But there are things that I learned from bad bosses about how I am not going to run my team. I am not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say it's all about me when things go well and then point the finger when things go bad. Right. It's quite the opposite, actually. But, not everybody operates that way.
Yeah. And actually I've felt it, hidden my cubicle before back in the day.
Exactly.
PTSD there, but yes.
Exactly. Okay. So other thing about running your own business is, as you talked about, it does afford us maybe a few more freedoms that you might not have as an employee, right? Whether it's volunteering, whether it's getting involved with different charity organizations, or in your case, Katie, what you have coming up. I want to talk about that as well. Speaking of, kind of doing things and saying yes to things that you said. So tell us about what you have coming up shortly as far as your hike goes. I want to talk about that.
You're so sweet. I think
it's fascinating. It's just so very impressive. That's why.
I am doing a 16-day trek to Mount Everest Base Camp. So I am not going up. I do not have any intentions of climbing the mountain, but so I'm taking 20 days flying into Kathmandu and then doing the little puddle jumper over to the base of the Himalayas. So I'm super excited going with another family business owner here in Orange County with a tour group. And so, we'll do 16 days of hiking there, and we're actually going to spend the nights. We're camping at base camp one night before we come back. So it's I don't even know like how that idea kind of came about. Like 10 years ago, I never would have. But again, I think it's just the power of yes, and one thing led to another, and then the opportunity was presented. And when someone said she was going, I said, "Can I go?" And she's like, "For real?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I really want to go." So. I have no idea how it's going to go, but I am like training. It's super fun. And then I just figure I'm going to get my body as strong as I possibly can. And then we'll see how I react to the altitude. That's the biggest thing that I don't,
Yeah, there's no way to truly train and prepare yourself for what Mount Everest has to offer, right?
Yeah. So I think there's just a lot of symbolism with being able to, like, we each have our mountains that we have to climb. And I think, again, if you follow a plan and do the hard work to kind of prepare, I think that each of us have the ability to overcome whatever it is that's kind of presented in front of us. And I think there's something also I'm excited about, being able to really be somewhere that the culture is so fundamentally different from where I have been before, at least even just with any sort of travels, but also just that reminder of slowing down, the reminder of more kind of simple ways of life. And I think just from what I understand, the passion of the people who live on the mountain, who that will like cross paths with along the way. I think there's going to be a lot of lessons to be learned.
I'm sure it's going to be a kind of a spiritual journey, not necessarily religious, but a spiritual journey, no matter what. Just, again, you can't really prepare and think, well, the last time I climbed a mountain like that, here's what I felt, right?
I know.
It's a once in a lifetime experience. That's awesome.
I'm really excited about it for sure. And I think that's, like you said, the benefits of owning your own business too, in that sense, because I really think, the societal structure is basically you work until X age, and then you have this luxury and freedom to be able to do it. And a part of actually we're working on a future of family business or future project and doing the future of family business. And one of the categories that we were looking at is reimagining retirement. And so reimagining then again how the one generation leaves, then it's kind of structures the same way, but how do we actually do it where then if you want to go and do kind of some of these more bigger expeditions that you may not be able to do later in life, just with age and health, why wait, kind of thing. And so I think that's that
we create opportunities within the family business that allow people to kind of come and go and support, and knowing how things are. I think is a cool idea. One thing that I do think is interesting, a lot of people say, you guys are so crazy. I'm like, okay, first of all, Kate does this stuff, which I am so incredibly inspired by what she's doing. But I just think it's so interesting that you weren't this way always. Like, of like kind of that trigger thing. And I think it's probably a whole nother podcast, but like, of her starting to say yes in 2014, I think fundamentally changed who you are now, doing, half marathons and Ragnar, or I don't even know what half the things are that you do, run in the mud, all the things, but that you can, it kind of goes back to agency of like, this wasn't just the way that she was, the way that you always were. It was not that at all. And to be able to
even my mom says, you've always been this way. I said, Mom, I didn't do any, Jenny actually did sports. I did not do sports. I did like none of this kind of stuff.
No.
And I think that's, I just, I wanted to push and learn and make myself uncomfortable. And I just chose health and fitness as like the starting point.
But now you're starting to see like, oh, wait, if I can do like that first, I always say like, when I talk about that I love like talking to people about audacious goals. I think sometimes that overwhelms people. They're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, lady. Like there's like a speed bump right here and I can't even get over this little speed bump. But I think once you get over the first one, there's like, oh, wait a second, I've got a little bit of momentum and then I can keep going. Like I can see it way over here and dream it. And I think once you got over, Kate, that very first, like I think you did a couch to 5K or whatever it was that you did there. Maybe you went straight into the marathon probably. But then you were like, oh, wait, if I can do this, I can do this. And if I can do this, then I probably can do this. And then it just starts like steamrolling. And now it's like, oh, now we sit and have audacious goals, what if, and dream a new world. And it seems attainable. But I think people just need to get over that first little hump.
Yeah, and I think that's something too. I remember, and so one of my other areas is just I hated walking into networking things. I mean, still, I think we all probably have to like do a little pump up in the parking lot to like do the small talk and those types of things. But I just realized that I needed to overcome that. But even still, and like part of it is, I remember I got asked to speak on a panel, and I was like, to go up on stage, and then with the people who were there, it's the CEO of United Way here, Sue Park, and then a few other like just phenomenal speakers and just truly inspirational. And I was like, I should not be on this panel. And the woman who asked me, which I really appreciated, she said, you have to remember in the room, because I like just look up to these people and I'm like, what do I have to share? And she's like, we have to remember though, like each people, as Jenny's saying, like we can see those people like where they are and then just say, there's no way I can get there. And so we need to also be inspired and be shown that it's incrementally along the way, right? And so that helped remind me that there's just a lot of inspiration that we can share with people to say, like, I was just like you, X number of years ago, and these
just
are
because
some
we're not here doesn't mean that.
And I still am like looking
right,
at these
right.
people and saying, I still got a ways to go, but now I see the path. Like as Jenny's saying, I think before it can keep you frozen when you see where somebody is and you forget about. I always talk about like the messy middle. Like people don't talk enough about the messy middle, especially with like business ownership and those kinds of things, that I'm just like, that's not talked about as often. And so like when you're in it, then you think you're doing something wrong. But actually, I think if you're in the muck and it's a little bit messy, it probably means you're doing something right. Because if it wasn't, then you're staying stuck and you're not pushing yourself far enough. And I think that's personal growth, professional growth, business growth, all of those kinds of things that uncomfortableness actually means that you're pushing and that you're actually doing something right.
Yeah, I think that should be the title of your book, is The Messy Middle.
I started writing it in COVID.
Oh, nice. I love that. Well, and it brings a couple of things to mind. First, I mean, to your point, Jenny, also is, the incremental wins along the way, right? It wasn't like the person woke up and all of a sudden was the CEO of United Way one day. No. There's a lot that had to happen between school and when she actually got to that role, right? And I think a lot of times I like the idea of the audacious goals as well, but I also like breaking it up. Right. Yes. Because we have to, especially as business owners, right, we tend to be very hard on ourselves. And my goal is to have this revenue this year. And even though whether you get there or not, at least for me, I forget sometimes to celebrate the small wins along the way. We're not going to, I almost need to kind of reverse engineer to get to X number of revenue, right? I need to have this number of deals. To get to those number of deals, I need to have this number of proposals out, those kind of things. So kind of reverse engineering that, and then celebrating each of those wins along the way. Whenever I have my weekly calls with my team, we talk about, what lessons learned from last week, but also what was your success from last week? And many times they have to think and sit back and go and literally look up and think, God, what went well last week, right? But if they know I'm going to ask them that question, then hopefully they're thinking more about it. They're more aware of the successes when they do happen. And they're not just breezing over it and saying, oh, yeah, that was fine. But, what have you done for me lately? Instead, it's, I maybe I didn't win the big prize, but I still got an honorable mention at a bare minimum, right? And you need to celebrate those wins also. It's not easy to do.
Yeah. I think as achievers, sometimes achievers and dreamers, it's hard to, because I know where it can be. So then I'm like, I'm like disappointed that we're only here, but like, that's so much further than we were. Like if we look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, doing this type of thing, like how cool is this to be able to chat with you and to do these. And so. And
I'm curious about both of you are involved in many different groups. I know Girls Inc. and Ronald McDonald House as well. How have you decided which groups to get involved in? Talk about the power of yes, right? But also it can be kind of the trap of yes if you're not careful. How did the two of you decide, where to get involved? Jenny, you're still involved with Girls Inc., I think, right?
I'm not on their board. No, I was, and they're incredible. I mean, they're promote girls to be strong, smart, and bold. So I mean, it's kind of like right in line. Now, actually on Team Kids board with Julie, and really empowering the youth and the next generation to let them know that they have a voice, and creating the philanthropists of the future. It is hard. There's so many incredible, amazing nonprofits globally and in the country, but here in Orange County. And so we can't be a part of everything. I mean, we just can't, for time, money, all the types of things. So really it's us coming back and saying, like, what matters most to us? There's a few different things, and then the leadership and what they're doing. So I love giving back to kids and helping them dream big. So I picked that and saw Julie where she is. So it's trying to figure out the right nonprofits for the mission that matters most to us. And it is hard. Kate, I know you've got with Ronald McDonald. I mean, how we say no.
And I think for me, so I've been, I'm in my 7th year on the board for the house, for the Ronald McDonald House, and then I'm co-chairing their capital campaign. So we've raised, we were supposed to raise 12 million. We're at 14.4, now shooting for 15 million. So we're doubling the house, going from 20 rooms to 44. When I first, as a part of this kind of personal growth journey, I was looking for something to kind of just get more involved in that I could really make an impact. And I didn't specifically go out seeking this opportunity. It just kind of landed in my lap, which was an amazing opportunity. So it was an awesome board to be able to get involved in, because it is actually tied to then like a global company or organization that then has its regions. And so there's a lot to be able to learn with an organization of this size. And then I've just continued saying yes for opportunities. When I first got asked to do this capital campaign, it was one of the biggest things ever for me to undertake. It I had never done, again, even on the sales side, so having to go out and do fundraising and really being in the spotlight, and then on stage it's different speaking opportunities. So I then also knew it would push me in a way that I knew would help make a huge difference, and it has really exponentially changed kind of like who I am, even then like professionally, like helped with kind of feeling more comfortable with speaking opportunities, sales opportunities, those kinds of things. And I tell people all the time, I think that the best sales training for like young sales coordinators is if you can get them on a fundraising committee of a nonprofit that they're passionate about. It's a win-win on all sides, right? It helps employee engagement, all those different kinds of things, but they get sales experience being able to go out and talk about an organization that they're super passionate about. If you misstep while you're doing the pitch to try to get some fundraising, it's not for your business. So I feel like there's just a lot of opportunity to be able to actually make it like a win-win on all sides too, when ways to be able to relook at kind of like the philanthropy side of things. I think also when I talked about getting involved in the capital campaign and thinking about the initial time investment, because it was huge time investment, and to be able to have the support of Jenny and our family to be able to do that, the doors that have opened though, and the people that we've met, that I'm not sure that I would have had opportunities as easily to get in the room with these kinds of people, has made a huge impact for us as well, for Mackenzie. And so
that's great. Wow.
Again, it's a win-win on all sides. And I think that's a way of really, and tying even back to what Julie Hudash, who's the founder of Team Kids that Jenny's on. I love the idea of changing the perception around philanthropy. And then it's not just around having to have big dollars, because when we first got involved too, our parents and really like our grandparents volunteered, did a ton of volunteerism, and it was always kind of just been a family value. Our parents, because they didn't have as much time, once they got to a certain spot, were giving back to the community, but we're doing it more anonymously. And so even then our own team didn't know about the impact that their hard work was making on the community. So then when we came in, we kind of had to switch where we had to reinvest back into the company. So we couldn't be giving as much funds away, but we wanted to be able to then like leverage and parlay our network to be able to get exposure for different nonprofits. But we started sharing with the team about the nonprofits that we'd been giving to, and then incorporated them into the process also. So it's not just supporting the nonprofits that matter to Jenny and I, but also then trying to support.
I love that. That's amazing.
Our team as well.
I think one of the themes that you both have been sharing is that, not only is it okay, but it really, you need to allow yourself to be uncomfortable. It's okay to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because it's just a learning process and it's great for personal development. But also, as you said a minute ago, Kate, it opens doors that otherwise would not have been open to you. And I think that's one of the things that, we can have a whole nother podcast about, Gen Z generation. My kids are 21 and 20, almost 26. And we talk a lot about how, it's important to be uncomfortable, right? It doesn't feel good. It's not a happy thing going into it, and makes you nervous as hell. But you've got to understand and have that experience, that personal experience, doing something that's difficult or that's, not pleasant or whatever it might be, and pushing through that and coming out on the other side and realizing, okay, that was unpleasant or uncomfortable, but I did it. I made it work, right? And I'm better for it.
Hey, by the way, thanks again for listening. And if you like what you're hearing in today's discussion, please subscribe to our channel or leave us a review. And we'd love for you to share this episode with your friends and family. Now, back to our show.
Why not do it in a safe environment over here that isn't, and like get it in the beginning of where those things are. But in the world that we're in right now, uncertainty is the only thing that is constant.
That's the theme, exactly.
So that is a life skill, that dealing with uncertainty is something that all of us need more and more of that. And I think it was a cool thing to be able to have that in a safe space to learn some of these skills. I'll say a safe space, but
exactly. So I'm curious. So you've talked a lot about kind of the changes over the years, and when your dad ran the business, and now when you're running it as well, and you took over. Where do you see it going? Where do you see, for example, I mean, AI, again, a whole nother podcast if we wanted to, but do you see things like AI or technology, or even just kind of the polarization of the country as well? Are you seeing these trends as being having a big impact on the business going forward?
I believe that fundamentally people want their voices to be heard. They want to be seen as individuals. And so it's a really exciting space to be in, where we actually give people the opportunity to have their voices to be heard, to be seen in an authentic way of having these types of things. So, the polarization of what they're doing, hopefully we want to be able to get to a spot. I mean, that is a huge issue in our country at the moment. I read a book by Monica Guzman recently. I hadn't thought of it that way. It was amazing. And it's about having moments of, man, I hadn't thought about it that way. I hadn't seen the other people's perspectives. Like, that's how I'm hopeful that we can help. So yes, polarization is huge. If we can help shine lights on people, give them a voice, talk about things, I think is huge. AI 100% is speeding up the way things are being done, the jobs that are being done, how they're being done. We're definitely using it and leveraging it here of what's going to be going on in the future. There's just so much change, and that's some of this the strategic foresight work that we're doing, and the futures work of what does a future community look like? What does then the future of education look like? What do we need to do so we're helping businesses not just figure out, look at data that exists to look at trends and patterns, ask people what they want today, but what's happening? What are the underlying value shifts that are happening that we want to make sure that we're more prepared in the future, so we're more resilient companies going forward? Which is fun. I'm working on some really cool futures project and leaning in of what does the future of community look like, of bringing people together, and oh man, there's so many things of just movement of people and where people are and communication. I mean, there's just so much. Technology is one piece of the puzzle. We've got the social and economic and political and a bunch of things of where we are. So it's an exciting space to be in, but we hope, I'll just kind of say, maybe kind of closing that out of, how do we lean in though to still be human and to care about each other? Like, to solve a lot of these problems is to see other people's perspectives, listen and learn from each other, and realize we're not as different as we all think that we are, so how can we give voices to people and have them be heard and be part of the process? People want their voices to be heard, and they want to be part of the process to build products, services, and experiences. So the companies that lean in and can co-create with people, I believe, are the ones that are going to succeed going forward. My tiny soapbox.
Very well said. I love, that's great. That's perfect. No, I agree. I think, again, back to the whole point about being okay with being uncomfortable, talking to somebody who has a completely different opinion than you do, no matter what the subject might be, that's okay. You don't have to convince them, and they're not going to convince you to change your mind completely, but at least listen, right? Be open to listening to their perspective, and maybe, like you said, gleaning a little bit more understanding as to why they think that way. Right. And that's what it's all about, is just that mutual respect and that conversation as well. No, I love the way you said that, for sure. Well, good.
I love it. Out of that one, just as a kind of a one takeaway out of that book, I highly, highly recommend it. But instead of asking people like what they believe or like who they voted for or whatever, one of the big things is, tell me about your experience with that. And so it's, what's your experience with that situation? It was like, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of it that way. That's so different, because when someone says, oh, I voted this way, or I believe that my stance is on this, then we make assumptions of why that. But when we ask people about, tell me about your experience with that, that's like been a game changer for us to lean into that.
I love that. That's a great way to look at it. No, for sure. So how can, I know we're short on time here, so how can people get a hold of you? There's so many great things that you're involved with your own business, with the new business that you're doing also, with the Family Business Center as well. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Oh gosh, I think, we're pretty darn active on LinkedIn. I would definitely like Jenny Dinnen or Katie Rucker on LinkedIn, that we're pretty darn active. McKenzieCorp.com is our website of what we have going on there. The best way to get in touch with us.
I think LinkedIn is probably the best way, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And people might be interested in learning more about what you're doing and how to do it, and kind of just get your insights as well, just with all the things that you're involved in. It's great perspective. I know the three of us love being sounding boards, and we're always happy to be, have a conversation because we learn from it as well. So we can provide some guidance and advice, but then we're also learning along the way.
Yeah.
That's what life is all about.
It is, for sure. I think that's it. Like I said earlier, I think, it's in what you were saying, if you can leave people feeling inspired, ours is, really, I just believe that there's so much good in the world too. And so, if we can sprinkle some of that kindness and compassion around there, I think that collectively we can come together and solve some of these bigger problems. I think we have to, at some point, how do we let go of the ego and let go of certain types of things so that we can start reimagining what kind of our next chapter of all of it's going to look like, just because we are in such a weird time. And so I just think that there's so much opportunity to be able to come together for the greater good of being able to make positive impact around us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we have a unique position as well as business owners with kids, right? That we can model and impart these ideas on, if for no other reason, to make sure that they remember to keep an open mind also, right? And they get to see a lot more of the inner workings of a business versus someone who has a parent who just works at, HSBC or, Home Depot, whatever it might be, right? So we have a chance to really make, I think, an outsized impact, by bringing up these kids, with this exposure as well, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. We could talk for another, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 hours if we had the time. But all three of us have a day job. So we should probably get back to that at some point. But thank you for being very transparent, for being very vulnerable and open to the conversation, and really kind of imparting the wisdom and the experience that you've had. It's been great.
Oh, thank you, Ken. Thank you for just being a champion, for shining the light. I love, I've got your Optimist, Practical Optimist book, but I love that you're shining the light on businesses doing good and sharing these stories. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's wonderful. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.